As I left and turned my back on the Bierton District of Particular Baptist Church on Wednesday the 26th of June 1984, my heart was heavy and sad, as the church had turned from the gospel truth of particular redemption, one of our chief articles of religion, and they were not prepared to correct the matter. I believed it was the church's first step on her road to apostasy, and so, in the fear of God and for the honour of his name, I felt I could do no other, as I had tried for 18 months seeking to correct this matter. I was resolved not to return to the church that I had joined in 1976. My eyes looked upwards towards heaven for the support and direction and help from God that I needed. I was the father of 4 children. My wife was Irene, and our children were Isaac, the eldest, 5 years old, Esther, 4 years old, Ella and David, who were twins. We were members of the church that I had joined in 1976 and had been called by the Lord and sent by the church to preach the gospel in 1982. The church had begun to allow general redemption to be taught, which was contrary to Scripture and against our articles of religion. I had tried for 18 months, bringing this to the attention of the church, doing all I could to resolve the matter, but at the last church meeting a decision was made to take no steps to correct these serious errors that I had brought to their attention. They had turned from teaching the gospel truth of particular redemption and allowing general redemption to be taught, and were stuck in traditions that were wrong, unhelpful, and they were not prepared to correct the matter. I recorded in detail all of these events and pointing out clearly the errors with corrections that needed to be made in my book, The Bierton Crisis 1984, and now is republished in Let Christian Men Be Men. It was commented at the time by the Reverend Stephen Scott Pearson that this response of mine to the affairs of the church was as though I had taken a sledgehammer to crack a nut. I was not out to crack anything, but rather to stand in defence of the gospel of Christ and the doctrine of particular redemption. To understand the background and reasons behind all this, it is necessary to know how all this began. And I never did put together an orderly account of how I became a Christian, and how and why my life was changed, and of my conversion from crime to Christ until I got news of my brother's imprisonment in the Philippines. It was then I felt compelled to write an account of our lives and publish it in my book, Converted on LSD Trip. However, on leaving the Bierton Church, we still believed it right to belong to and be a membership of a gospel church. So what were we to do? We made a decision to move to Snail Beach in Shropshire to join the Lord's Hill Baptist Church. The difficulties that this presented was that, try as I may, I could not get a lecturing post in Shropshire, and for 18 months I lived as a lodger at the Royce's home in Luton during the week and travelled home at weekends. I began to feel depressed and felt I had become as one of those that was rejected by God, and at the same time Irene found things difficult with the 4 children and the ways the village in Snail Beach. We then moved back to Luton and bought a house in Graham Gardens. However, I had a run-in with the college over a satellite television venture, and I was paid £6,000 to leave. This is what took us to Fareham. Again, this was not straightforward, as we could not sell our house in Luton, and that was when the mortgage interest rate went up to 15%. Thankfully I got a job at Fareham College, but again I had to live in lodgings during the week until we sold our house in Luton. This really was the beginning of my troubles. I began to doubt the existence of God, fell into all manner of temptations, which led to adultery and a break-up in my marriage. I began to live as though God did not exist, and I did just as I pleased. I left my wife, remarried, was the cause of the break-up of our family and home. In short, I had made shipwreck of my life and our family. I became very depressed. I knew what I'd done wrong, and I needed the help from God. It was then I cried out to God again for the help I needed, and gradually I became better and sought to be involved in a church again. Also, Rebecca was born, and I was invited to join the Jesus is Lord Church at Warsash. However, it was soon after that the elders of the Warsash Church wished to appoint women as elders in the church. I knew this to be wrong and against the scriptures, and when I spoke to these elders about this, I was told to keep quiet and say no more. It was then I wrote my book, Mary Quite Contrary, dealing with the whole matter and the relationships between men and women. I had learned by painful experience to turn from what is written in Scripture is a sure forerunner of sorrow. It was at that time, about 1998, I got news from my brother in the Philippines, who, after 5 years of his 16-year prison sentence and a period of depression, came to believe the gospel and that Jesus was the Christ, the Son of the living God, and had been baptized as a Christian in New Bilibid prison. My difficulties, however, were ongoing, and I had to live with the consequences of my actions. However, it was when I got news of my brother and him becoming a Christian in New Bilibid prison that Gordon Smith and I went on a mission of help to the Philippines. You see, my brother and I had been in prison together in the 60s, and so had something in common with prison inmates. And during that mission, I spoke to hundreds of prison inmates, sharing our story of conversion from crime to Christ, and worked with other converted criminals, namely Lucas Tangatton Jr., William Ola Poloc, both former convicted criminals who had become Christians whilst in prison. I will tell you more as I develop the story in the next video. Good news, systematic theology for the Philippines.